but we're here.
Well, see,
You ready, Bobby? Are you all good?
Everybody ready? Thank you, everybody, for being here today on this this day where we can considering a couple things. Before I get into the substance of the press conference, which is immigration, I've been asked a number of times about the Freedom Caucus and our strategy on the floor. So I'm going to just give it to you real quick and try not to distract too much. But our strategy has been to use every procedural tool available to slow down the velocity of the left turn of the Democrat leadership in their party. We've never seen a change in rules that have narrowed the scope and the participation allowed to the minority party like we have with this particular administration. They've altered the rules. They've kicked Republicans off committees. They're not marking up any bills. They're just bringing them straight to the floor. They continue to have military presence and fences around the people's house, and they continue, even though the security personnel have indicated there is no threat between members of Congress towards other members of Congress, to wand and send us through magnetometers, all trying to be symbolic. We've endured multiple hearings about people who question the integrity of the last election, which the Democrats did for 4 years towards President Trump. We've endured the repeated hearings calling those people domestic terrorists. We've seen the hard left turn on policy where they've attacked the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, changed electoral integrity issues to actually legitimize processes and procedures which don't bring electoral integrity. They've spent $2 trillion in a bill that barely addresses the COVID issues, and now they're failing to, at the same time that they're failing to deliver on border security, and we have a crisis on the border. We're going to be voting on amnesty bills, which continue to be a draw. So we, at the Freedom Caucus, want to avail ourselves of the last and few remaining procedural tools in the toolbox, because what it does is it slows down, and that's one of the obligations of the minority parties, to slow down bad policy, bad ideas, and then to create narrative about that. And so that's what we're trying to do. And with that, I'm going to talk about now the crisis on the border. Biden's border crisis, and Biden's inhumane border crisis. At a time we're facing this crisis created by this administration. This administration created that crisis. We should not be debating and passing amnesty this week. We should be passing meaningful reforms, which is why I have introduced the Stopping Border Surges Act that actually includes solutions. The Biden inhumane border crisis is preventable and would have been preventable, but this administration refers to it as a challenge or a problem. They deny what's happening on the border. Instead of building on the hard work of the Trump administration, this administration is singularly focused on undoing the successful policies. The most visible example is the border fence. President Biden had terminated the declaration of a national emergency at the southern border and stopped construction on the border wall on his first day in office. And when I took 9 members to the border, including some of my colleagues behind me, in early February, we could already see the ramifications of leaving massive holes in the wall after creating transportation infrastructure to facilitate building border fence. Removal of complete areas where there were previously 4-strand barbed wire in some of the most heavily human trafficked, drug trafficked, sex trafficked corridors along our southern border. This administration knew it was coming, which is why they increased and started taking out of mothballs soft-sided facilities that had been established under the Trump administration. They knew this surge was coming because of their lousy policies. Forcing aliens to remain in Mexico removed the incentive for aliens to illegally cross the border and make frivolous asylum claims, knowing they would be released into the United States after making those claims. They would be released into the interior for years. Ending the Remain in Mexico policy has basically restored the catch and release policy. The very same day, DHS announced that it was suspending new enrollments in the Migrant Protection Protocols known as MPP, or Remain in Mexico, which required aliens arriving at the border to wait in Mexico while their claims are processed by the immigration officials. Those two things happened. They were right out of the gate by this administration. Those are two examples of how this administration is undoing successful policies and telling aliens that our borders are open. That's why you see at the San Isidro port in Tijuana, that's why you see Biden let us in t-shirts. That's why you see people with flags, Biden let us in. Nobody should be surprised that we have a crisis at the border. And Secretary Mayorkas refuses to answer questions that we have continually put to him about what they're doing. We invite him to come to the Freedom Caucus and address the issues that are before this nation today. But their intent, the Democrats are intent on passing 2 amnesty bills that reward previous generations of aliens who came to this country illegally. The message that they're sending is clear. If you get in and stay long enough, you too can get amnesty. That's the wrong message to send. It is a magnet for people to come. That's why you have caravans being formed from the Northern Triangle states all through Mexico. Instead of passing amnesty, we should be debating real reforms that strengthen our border security and improve the integrity of our immigration system. These bills send the message to those seeking to enter the U.S. illegally that there is no consequence for breaking our laws, and nothing in either of these bills does anything to stop illegal immigration or secure our border. After weeks of denying that a crisis even existed, the Biden administration can no longer deny the crisis, but somehow they ignore the crisis. Last week, CBP announced that they had over 100,000 encounters in February, and yesterday, Secretary Mayorkas stated that DHS is on pace to encounter more individuals in the southwest border than we have in the last 20 years. And I remind you, the high point of that was in May of 2019, when we actually apprehended more than 156,000 people and had another 100,000 known getaways. This is unsustainable. The crisis is real. We must pass real reform, like the Stopping Border Surges Act, to fix the loopholes in our immigration laws and remove the incentives for aliens to come to the country illegally. What Democrats are doing on the floor this week does exactly the opposite. And they ought to be held accountable for what they're doing to the country and the border right now. It's not just a border problem. It is a United States whole country issue. I am pleased to have my colleagues in the House Freedom Caucus join me today. Our first speaker will now be Jody Hice from Georgia.
Thank you, Andy. I'm Jody Hice from Georgia's 10th District, and it's an honor to stand with my colleagues here to discuss an absolutely critical situation that's happening on our southern border. It is, as Andy mentioned, more than just a crisis at the border. It's a national security issue. It is a crisis of gigantic proportions in every way. Just the other day, the Washington Post described it as it relates to children. They said that children are, quote, waiting in cramped holding cells with concrete floors and benches. Now, we were told just a couple of years ago that kids were in cages, that it was a moral catastrophe that was happening, and you would think under this administration that their attitude is that these children have a plush welcome center that they're coming to these days. It is absolute hypocrisy coming from the other side of the aisle, and it is something that absolutely has to do it. Our border is essential for the security of this country. We are having smugglers come across, we're having traffickers, we're having drug traffickers, we're having people who are testing positive with COVID, and all the while we have laws in this country, right ways and wrong ways, to come here. We welcome those who come the right way. But to open the border and pretend as though we are a nation without borders is absolute lunacy. In fact, there is no such thing as a country with open borders. That's just a landmass, and that's really what this administration is doing. Make no mistake, President Trump inherited a horrible situation on the border from President Obama. President Trump aggressively dealt with those problems fix the problems, and handed over to President Biden a good situation at the southern border. And in 3 short months, he has created an absolute disaster, and one that must be dealt with, one that no longer they need to be hiding behind. It's time to be transparent. It's time to be honest. It's time to admit that we have a crisis. It's time to deal with the problem. And I'm honored to stand here with my colleagues to address that problem and call on our national leaders to do something about it. And it's my honor at this point to bring here my good friend from Texas, Chip Roy.
Thanks, Jody. Appreciate it. Well, I think my friend from Georgia, I was thinking it was 30 years ago today, I was in Savannah, Georgia at St. Patrick's Day. I was 18 years old. I won't get into the details, but it was a hell of a lot more fun than what I'm doing right now. But happy St. Patrick's Day. Happy to be here with my colleagues, because my colleagues standing behind me and with me here actually believe in sovereignty and securing the border of the United States. I woke up yesterday morning in Laredo, Texas, having spent the day before visiting with Border Patrol, riding along with Border Patrol along the border in Laredo, going down to the river, meeting with Border Patrol. We had 15 apprehensions while I was with them, and we couldn't grab and stop everybody that was coming across the border. We met with Border Patrol at a part of the Rio Grande where you can walk across, and met with an agent who had a 3-mile stretch he was in charge of, solo, by himself, because so many Border Patrol agents in Laredo are now in the Rio Grande Valley running processing centers. Your border, ladies and gentlemen, Americans, listen to me, your border is wide open. It is being exploited by cartels right now, today. Fentanyl, dangerous narcotics, opioids are getting driven up between the ports of entry, exploiting wide open borders that Border Patrol is outmanned, outgunned. You got a 70-mile stretch in Laredo with 2 miles of navigable road. You go down there, you go ride in the vehicles. Media, go do your job and go show the American people what is actually happening at our border. Because we've got hundreds of thousands of people rushing our border because the Biden administration doesn't give a whit about the actual immigrants. They want political benefits for the Democratic Party. That's it and nothing more. Because if you actually cared about immigrants, you wouldn't allow them to be abused by cartels on a journey so that you can try to get more voters or say that you're pro-immigrant in the false name of compassion. But that is what the Biden administration, that is what Nancy Pelosi, that is what Chuck Schumer is doing today. And real people get hurt. These are human beings, American citizens who are having their ranches run over, houses broken into, high-speed chases, people getting absolutely destroyed along the southern border. The Democratic mayor of Del Rio saying that they've got a crisis. Where are the Democrats? They don't care. They literally do not care about what's happening on our southern border. And yet it is destroying our sovereignty, harming American citizens, harming immigrants. A strong border is pro-immigrant. A strong border is pro-America. And yet our president is either completely oblivious to what's going on, or he's actually enabling it and encouraging it. Either one of those is completely unacceptable. They go after President Trump saying impeachment twice over. Yet this president is refusing to take care to execute the laws of the United States. You tell me what's going on down at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue. You tell me who's in charge. Because no rational human being leading a country would allow this to happen on our southern border. I would ask every member of the media, get in a plane, go to the Rio Grande Valley. Go look at what's happening. Go see how many people are being processed and brought into this country, encouraging the cartels to continue to abuse human beings. $30,000, $7,000 a head. They're making $11 million a day in the Laredo sector, moving human beings and narcotics for profit. Think about that. The United States of America, the most powerful nation in the history of the world, we're allowing that to be our southern border? It is completely unacceptable, and I'm proud to stand with my colleagues here highlighting this for the American people. But we're not going to stop. We're not going to wait for the turnover in 2022 or 2024. We're going to highlight this every single day because it's impacting our country. One final point. We just voted as a body, Republicans, on a new rule with respect to earmarks. I got to tell you, I've been around this town as a staffer and now as a member for 15, 20 years. The Republican Party just abandoned principle at the doorstep of wanting to say they're going to bring home dollars for people back in the district. When we have $30 trillion in debt, they just dove right into the swamp. Well, I got to say, that isn't the leadership that we need. The Republican Party should be ashamed of itself for embracing earmarks when the American people are staring $30 trillion of debt, businesses shut down while we spent $6 trillion in the last year destroying our economy, shutting down businesses and harming the American people. Instead of going down and burying ourselves in the swamp, we should be standing up against the Democrats and what they're trying to do to continue what's broken about this town. We're going to stand up as a group, and we're going to continue to fight that kind of corruption as well as stand up for a secure border and defend the people of the United States. I'm going to turn this over to my great friend, Debbie Lesko.
Well, great job, Chip. That really hit the nail on the head. I'm Debbie Lesko from the great border state of Arizona. And even though President Biden is denying it, there is a crisis at the border. And you know the reason that I know that there's a crisis on the border is because law enforcement in Arizona have told me all of the things that would lead up to saying there's a crisis on the border. The mayor and sheriff of Yuma, Arizona, have said thousands of people are flooding over the border. ICE can't detain them. They're being released into the community. A number of them are not even tested for COVID. Cochise County, Arizona sheriff had said there is a problem at the border. People are being released into their community. And just yesterday, the mayor of Gila Bend, Arizona, a small town in Arizona, was desperate, saying the Biden administration has told them nothing except that they're going to house and release all these illegal immigrants into their community. He said he has asked for information from the Biden administration and has got nothing. Nothing, nada. What kind of president does that? What kind of president releases illegal immigrants that could have COVID into our communities? Last time I went down to the border, I talked to the sheriff of Yuma County. We were right by the river, the border between Mexico and the United States. And right there was a date tree farm. And he told me, you know what, Debbie? We get called here all the time because women, illegal immigrant women, are getting raped. I don't understand why the President of the United States would incentivize people to travel thousands of miles. Children, minors, traveling thousands of miles. I believe he is culpable of child abuse because his policies are incentivizing these people to travel at the hands of the dangerous cartel. Now, when the White House and the president say, oh, well, we're just critical as Republicans, but we don't have a solution, that is totally false. We have had legislation. I have had legislation. I've reintroduced it this year that would help solve this border crisis. But you know what? Democrat Chairman Jerry Nadler wouldn't hear it last year, and I bet he's not going to hear it this year either. And you know what I base that legislation on? From the recommendation of the DHS officials and the Customs and Border Protection officials. They said these things will help solve the problem. But guess what? My Democrat colleagues will not even hear the bill. So with that, I call on the Biden administration to solve this border crisis. It is a humanitarian crisis for the immigrants. It's a humanitarian crisis for the people that live in the communities. It's a health crisis for the immigrants and the people that live in the communities. And it's a national security crisis. And with that, I want to introduce Representative Michael Cloud from the great state of Texas.
Good job, Doug.
Thank you for being with us here today to talk about this extremely important issue. The humanitarian and national security crisis at the border is horrific. It is tragic that we are here at this point having to talk about this. It was one thing for the Trump administration, who inherited a major challenge and had to come up with difficult decisions to fix a problem. But the Biden administration inherited a solution, and all they had to do to keep this from happening was absolutely nothing. What we're seeing at the border is tragic. It is extremely heartbreaking that we here in the United States, that this White House has decided, instead of partnering with the communities across our border, instead of partnering with families across this nation, has instead decided to partner with cartels. The moment this president was elected, the cartels knew, oh, it's open season again. Let's start recruiting. Let's start sending people to the border. Last month we had 100,000 apprehensions. Now, we use that term apprehensions. Mostly that's people coming to us and hunting down our folks to try to stay here. At about $3,000 a person, and that's the minimum, that's the low end of the figure. For each country they have different Chinese pay the most. That is hundreds of millions of dollars going into the coffers of the cartels. Now, we are a compassionate nation, but lawlessness is not compassion. We want people to prosper everywhere. But for that to happen, this nation needs to be that shining city on a hill that provides opportunity and freedom for everyone. And for other nations to look at that and see that if we embrace those principles, we can have that as well. But it's very difficult for these nations to develop and to help their people and to provide good incomes when they have an outsized corrupting influence, the cartels, in their nation. And our policies are enabling that and helping fund that. We were just down at the border and to talk to some of the agents who've given their life to serve our country. Down on the border, they've committed themselves to protect and serve the people of this nation and protect and serve our Constitution and laws of the land. But they feel like these policies that have been put in place have put them into, in essence, the last mile of the cartel mechanism. The machine that recruits migrants, that abuses them along the way, that puts them into indentured servitude, brings them to the border. Our folks process them and release them, oftentimes to be picked up by the cartels to continue to track them as they migrate into society. This is horrific. It should not be allowed here in the United States of America. We need to reverse these tragic policies that are endangering the lives of the people and our communities at large. And here's the tactic the cartels use. They overwhelm our system with a humanitarian crisis that literally takes our agents off the border, puts them at a computer processing paperwork, and then they run drugs through, fentanyl through, opioids through, the things that destroy American families, that kill potential of our young people. We've got to stop this. We've got to stop this. And I call on the White House to do so.
Good job, Michael. Good job, Michael.
Hi, I'm Yvette Harrell from New Mexico's 2nd Congressional District, so I too represent a border state. And I can't emphasize enough what my colleagues are saying here. I was at the border last week, or Monday, with McCarthy and others, and to see what is happening on our southern border is unbelievable. And I want to talk about it in terms that I think this president can understand. Come on, man. We deserve better than this. This is a health crisis. We've introduced Title 42. It's the PAWS Act. This bill actually keeps Title 42, a health policy, in play at the border. The Border Patrol needs it. They know it's a good tool. It works. It gives them the ability to expel those coming into our nation illegally, either at Mexico or Canada, because we're under the pandemic order. Look, I'm looking at you. We're wearing masks. This whole country has been shut down because of the COVID. A $25,000 fine if you take the mask off and don't comply with the airlines. We have had so many suicides in our state because of teens out of school. We have lost seniors. We have lost workforce. We have lost so many things in our nation. And yet somehow opening our southern border is the solution. It is not the right solution. And just like my colleagues have said, not only is it a national security issue, it is unfair. This week we learned that a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 5-year-old holding hands walked together to the southern border. Who knows how many don't make it? Even the Border Patrol cannot tell us how many are not making it. And somehow there's a mindset that we're not humanitarians, that we don't care about children, about our nation. You know what? Our priority is wrong, and what's killing our country is the double standard coming out of this White House. We had a solution. And because of this hate for President Trump, now we are going to turn this responsibility on every one of us, even you. So when we start seeing $15 billion coming out of the COVID relief package to help give illegals health care, I hope everybody in your family is well covered, because they're not covered in this bill. We did more for illegals in this bill. We are incentivizing illegals to come here at the risk of losing their lives, and the winners are the cartel. They're the only ones that know who's here illegally. They're the ones getting paid for it, and they're the ones in control. And if you don't think that's right, think again. That is absolutely what's happening. So we have to keep Title 42 in play. It is the one last policy that this administration has not diminished. Our Border Patrol agents deserve it, and they need it. You, as American citizens, need it. It is a health protection. It is important that we continue to get through this COVID, but that we do it in a way that is meaningful to American citizens. So I would implore you, if you haven't gone to the border, go. I'm taking a trip down in a few weeks. You are welcome to go with me. Come and see for yourselves what it looks like when you're away from the wall and you're looking at a barbed wire fence, and that's the border. When you're seeing the foot traffic coming through, where we're seeing cattle rustling and families' property destroyed every day. We've got to fix it. We deserve better. You deserve better. They deserve better. Americans deserve better. This is a crisis, and we have to address it now. Thank you. And with that, I will introduce my great friend, Congressman Gosar.
Good morning, everybody. It's a blessing to be here. I'm Paul Gosar from Arizona, and I have the honor of representing Yuma, Arizona. And Yuma represents the epicenter of what's happening with this border crisis. We're seeing those tragic consequences right in Yuma, where you have a small town being overrun by the policies or the lack of enforcement of those policies by this administration. My worst fears are becoming true. Illegal aliens are flooding into Arizona, and they're being turned loose into a part of our state that has very few resources. It's perfectly clear that this administration doesn't want to honor the laws of this country. And it's very truthful in their regards is how much they actually hate the previous administration at the behest of what's causing this United States citizen. It's a pandemic. Make it clear. Most of these people are not actually tested for COVID, and we have no idea if they have a security background check. Imagine your community, what happens in Yuma. You have limited resources, you're an ag community, they're overrun. In just 1 week, the number of unaccompanied minors being held in the CBP facilities increased by 31%. Let me repeat that. In 1 week, an increase of 31%. It's the highest number ever. And these are only the ones that we know about. What you're doing is you're empowering the cartels. The cartels run the border now. And if you don't think they know everybody that crosses, think again. You're principally exploiting human trafficking. That's exactly what you're doing. So how can you talk out of both sides of your mouth when you say that you're here for women and children, and yet they're being exploited one way or another? This is happening in Yuma, but it's happening all across the border. Rather than to continue to abandon our border, we need this president to stand up and enforce this U.S. laws and come to some solution. I call it like it is. This administration actually hated the previous administration, and they're blinded by that hatred and the fact that now they're costing this country and its citizens the respect that they deserve. Folks, there's a right way and a wrong way. This administration is doing it totally the wrong way. And with that, I would like to turn it over to my friend from Texas, Louis Gomer.
Thank you. What a juxtaposition. We have the drug cartels who are not sleeping, they're not resting, they're making more money than anybody in all of North America. They're driving, they're pushing, increasing profits. while the President of the United States is the one taking siestas as America is being invaded. It is an invasion. This is a disaster what's going on. And while we're told fences, walls do no good, they've still got a stinking wall fence around this place. Razor wire. We're told we have to lock ourselves up and be careful, wear multiple masks, says Dr. Fauci. And yet, on the border where there's an estimated 25% coming in with COVID, they're saying, come on in. Let's get you all through the United States. As the Border Patrolmen have told me, the drug cartels call us government workers their logistics. I said, like the commercial? They said, you bet. They get them across the border and get paid a lot of money to do it, and then we ship them wherever the drug cartels want them to be. I heard somebody from the White House saying, oh, but you got to understand, we hold these children till the parents come and check them. Well, the Trump administration was trying to do DNA testing, other checks to make sure that this was really a parent. It's not the parent most of the time, from what I understand from people on the border. I've been down there when I've seen them in line, long lines being processed in the middle of the night, and at the far end where I was, people have little kids and they're shuffling them around. Who's going to be the parent for this child? They have addresses the drug cartels gave them, telling them where they were going to go work to sell drugs or prostitution or be involved in human trafficking where the drug cartels wanted them. And they would sit there and, oh, I want that address, switching addresses. This is a travesty. It is horrendous. It is just an outrage to those that are being lured into this country to their detriment. Now, as an attorney, we've learned about something called an attractive nuisance. If you have something that lures other people into your property and they're harmed, you're responsible, and that is exactly the responsibility of the White House and this administration for luring hundreds of thousands of people to this country, probably over 1 million people by the end of the year, possibly earlier. It's time to stop it and stop harming those who are south of our border, around the world, coming here to their detriment, to our detriment, and it all stops at the land of siestas down at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue. I now yield to my friend Randy Weber.
Thank you, Judge. Last time we spoke, I gave you all the number 5,000. This time I'm going to give you that same number, 5,000. I'm also going to give you the number 40, and then I'm going to give you the number 8. Biden has pledged throughout his campaign that he would reverse Trump's ill-described policies, immigration system, and he's doing it all right. And as Judge Goldberg said, they hate Trump, and they will do anything to reverse his policies. The moment Biden took office, we saw a spike in unaccompanied children crossing the border because of his rhetoric. Him hanging out the signs, we're open for business. I guess he did that in between siestas, Louis. In January alone, 5,707 unaccompanied children were apprehended at the southwest border. Those are the ones that we catch. You remember that the United States has almost 2,000 miles of border with Mexico. Of that, almost 1,200 of those miles are Texas, or almost 3/5 of the border with Mexico. The 5,707 children who came in is 112% higher than last January, a year ago, and more than double the Januaries over the last decade. That's what Biden's doing. This is Biden's inhumane border crisis. Biden's inhumane border crisis. He owns this. DHS is now predicting that 117,000 children will cross this border without their parents. and that's probably a low guesstimate. Unaccompanied children are arriving in droves, about 9,500 encounters alone in the month of February. This is Biden's inhumane border crisis. He owns this. The Washington Post reported that more than 8,500 migrant children are at facilities run by the Department of Health and Human Services, while another 3,500, the highest figure ever, are stuck by CBP stations waiting for a spot to open for new facilities that Biden's going to build at American taxpayer expense. It is totally unbelievable, unacceptable. This is a clear, absolutely clear result of indecisive, failed, I guess, sleepy leadership. What did President Trump call him during the campaign? Sleepy Joe? I won't go there. It's mixed messaging. It's incentivizing risky behavior for these children to come across this border, led by drug cartels, infiltrating into a country that Biden is supposed to be protecting. He took an oath to protect the American people. To make matters worse, we're in the middle of a pandemic. And when President Trump had rallies and it was 10, 20,000, what did the Democrats call them? Super spreaders. But it's okay if 1 million illegal aliens come across our border without masks. That's okay if they infiltrate the United States. Just don't have political rallies, Americans. So much for freedom. Anyone with eyes can see this as a serious crisis. But where's Biden? I think Louis pointed it out. He's taking siestas in his basement. This is unbelievable. It's unacceptable. Listen, being in the basement is a disaster for baseball teams, and it's a disaster for the President of the United States who took an oath to defend America. 5,000. Remember last time we spoke when I was in the Texas legislature? Steve McCraw, the director of the DPS, had a briefing with us, told us there was over 5,000 Texans who by illegal aliens were either raped, beaten, robbed, murdered, run over in some cases. 40. I said the number 40. Steve McCraw told us that there's 40 religious sects, different religious sects, S-E-C-T-S, coming across our open border under Obama. The number 8. About 3 or 4 days ago, 8 illegals were in a pickup truck on the Texas roads. They were running from police, and they hit another truck head on and killed all 8 of them. This doesn't have to happen, people. Biden is responsible. He's to blame. I guess if President Reagan was here seeing this, he would say to Biden and Pelosi, Mr. Biden, Ms. Pelosi, if you want American freedom, if you want Americans protected, build up this wall. I now yield to my good friend, Mr. Rosendale.
Hello, thank you all for joining us out here today, and happy St. Patrick's Day. To everyone back in Montana, especially my good friends in Butte, America, who has the largest population from Ireland in the state, and those who wish they were from Ireland, especially today. I represent a northern border state, and we're 2,000 miles away from the southern border, but we're already feeling the impacts of this Biden policy. We're seeing drugs flow into our state, Mexican meth and fentanyl. It's hurting our people, and we have a real worry and concern about the cartels that are exploiting our reservations. We've got 7 reservations, and they are very, very susceptible to the cartels and their illicit drug trafficking and sex trafficking. The members up here have been worried about how the Biden open borders were going to impact us for quite some time. Chairman Biggs took us to the border a week into the Biden administration to see that this rollback was going to be a disaster. We spoke with Border Patrol, we spoke with customs agents, we spoke with local law enforcement, local ranchers and farmers. They've recognized and could already see these problems approaching. Since late January, we have warned that open borders and catch and release were brought back, there would be a crisis. And now these policies have become a reality. FEMA has been brought out to the site, folks, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. It is an emergency. It is a disaster. The encouragement of illegal immigration by Democratic rhetoric is causing a humanitarian crisis in the middle of a pandemic while also putting our nation's security at risk. And the thing is, it can be stopped. That's the biggest tragedy. We've proposed laws like the Remain in Mexico Act to capitalize on the successes of the Trump administration, to make sure that these folks are being retained across the border. There's a humanitarian and national security failure, and it was a direct result of the actions by this administration. For all that we cry about humanitarian treatment constantly from the Democratic Party, allowing children to be exploited and encouraging them to be smuggled and subjected to the cartels and placed many times in indentured servitude or forced into prostitution when they get here is an absolute crime. They're helping expose these children and American border towns to COVID-19. With all of the folks that are coming in here and all of the illicit drugs and sex trafficking that is taking place and is moving to the interior of our country, every city across the nation is becoming a border town. All of this is happening while our northern border is closed to everything but essential trade because of COVID-19, because of the Title 42. So why is it that we can implement Title 42 and enforce it on the northern border, but it's being completely ignored on the southern border? This needs to end, and we need to make sure that the Biden administration is held responsible for subjecting both the American people to this crisis, putting our national security at risk, and causing the inhumane and deadly treatment of hundreds of thousands of innocent people flowing into our country as a direct result of false promises by a misguided administration. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. We got time for a couple questions, maybe. Yes, ma'am.
You all talked a lot about how the importance of opening up the Capitol and taking down fencing. Are you telling members of the Freedom Caucus and your members that getting vaccinated is an important part of that reopening?
I don't think it is an important part of that reopening, to tell you the truth. We have almost 2/3 or 75% of the members have already been vaccinated here. What that fence represents is control, and it's an attempt to stigmatize anybody who is a conservative voter. Let me make this very clear. That is merely a symbol. There is no threat that's borne out by that fence. What they keep the fence up, why they keep the military here, is the same reason we've had multiple hearings saying that if you voted for Trump, you are a domestic terrorist. That's what their message is. The left's message is that's the Democrat message. So vaccinations is not part of the deal because it's control. That's what it is. When you have the lion's share of people who already have been vaccinated, that is no longer the issue. That is, in fact, I gotta refrain from laughing at the question. Anyways, next question. I'm a big believer if the former President Trump believes that that's the case and he's made that statement, then that's up to the individual. As long as we still live in a free country, then we can make those individual decisions. And that's what I believe. And I don't know if I'm speaking for the caucus that way, but I think I'm speaking for the multitude. But next question.
If I might add one thing, Andy?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to add one thing on this. Yesterday was 1 year ago for 2 weeks to stop the spread. Yesterday was the anniversary of that. And here we are a year later. And how many stories you're all writing on the number of people who didn't get cancer screenings, the number of mental health issues people were having, the number of issues we're having with school children, 3 million school children not getting educated, decimating a generation because this administration and Democrats in this body peddled fear, and the media peddled fear. Everybody understands the implications of the virus and wanting to take care of ourselves. My dad's 78, my mom's 72. I didn't celebrate Thanksgiving with them because I was trying to keep them safe. But this idea that we're going to solve this problem by putting fences, the razor wire around the people's house, around the Capitol, it's absolute insanity, and it's about power. It's about control, and that's what the Democrats are trying to do by pushing this. Yeah.
Congressman Roy, you briefly touched on this in your remarks on the vote for earmarks today in the Republican caucus. Do you guys know yet how many of your Republican colleagues opposed that?
We don't have a number yet, do we? We don't have a number yet.
Yeah. And then can I also ask on that, now that the rule has been reversed, though, I know that the Freedom Caucus has said...
Well, we don't even know if it's been reversed yet.
Well, if it has been, and there's reporting now that it has been overturned, if that's the case, will the Freedom Caucus members, are you guys going to commit to still not using the,
We've taken an official position against earmarks.
Now, most of the conversation right now is surrounding these unaccompanied minors, but we know that at least 4 people on the terror watch list were apprehended, 2 from Yemen and 1 from Serbia. A few weeks ago, there were 11 Iranians caught at the border.
In Yuma.
That is a state sponsor of terrorism. What do you have to say about that issue that a lot of people are overlooking?
Well, and thanks for getting back to the immigration issue. Well, that is being ignored. And in fact, if you remember, someone actually, a Republican mentioned that there were people from the terror watch list that had been mentioned, and we had a mainline or left stream media outlet say that that was a lie. It's not a lie, and that's why when Chip says, and all of us say, come on down to the border. I take people down to the border all the time. Yvette Harrell will take people down to the border, and when you get down to the border, attend a briefing if they'll give it to you. A lot of times the agency won't give briefings to the media. I don't know why, but they won't. But you'll hear the intelligence briefings, and what you're going to hear is that there's nobody that's coming across the border that the cartel doesn't approve. So the way that those people they get across that are coming from these states that sponsor terrorism, this is the way they do it. They flood a zone. They flood a zone, and if you've been there, I mean, Chip was describing seeing 15. I've been there where I've watched 55 people walk across the border. 2 coyotes, 53 people coming in, everybody's got a kid. All of the agents have to go and deal with those people. In the meantime, we had one agent who happened to spot the real purpose for that flooding of that zone, and that was people coming across with loads of drugs. The same thing happens with special persons of interest that are crossing the border. They flood the zone, they bring them across. Technology, the cameras are coming, the cameras gets focused on a zone over here where it's flooded, cameras missing the people over here, we can't got technology. Chip was talking about one agent doing 3 miles. That is not unusual. That is not unusual. And you're having literally tens and dozens of agents being removed from the border to go to facilities to process and manage that. For instance, in the Tucson sector, if you bring somebody in and you apprehend somebody at the border, it can take you 3.5 hours to transport somebody up to a location where you can hand them off and get back in. You might be gone 7 hours out of a 10-hour shift because you've caught 1, 2, 5. Our border is porous right now, and we are left unprotected.
Andy, can I add something to that?
Sure.
I'll just add, just night before last, echo what Andy just said. This is important. I was right there. We had 7 that were apprehended. They're put in a vehicle, and the 2 Border Patrol agents had to sit there waiting for transport for 2 hours. Now they're off the line. They're sitting there holding those 2, and now they're not patrolling that entire sector. Meanwhile, we later found out narcotics came up right through that same stretch because they don't have the manpower to do it. They don't have the resources. They don't have the cameras. They don't have the ability to stop them. And so we're leaving Border Patrol completely hanging. The last point is we've got foreign countries, and we're talking about the terrorist sponsor, that are now funding campaigns in Mexico, right? They're buying off the politicians in Mexico because we're creating essentially a narco state with empowered cartels with now outside countries coming in and funding it. We're doing this. We're allowing this, the United States of America, by leaving it wide open. Yeah.
So we appreciate all of you taking time out to be with us today, and with that, we're adjourned.
Thank you all. You're right, Hamas.
It is Hamas.